icons of peace and love and welfare are murdered essentially, um, whether or not by maniacs or by some would say the powers that be would have done it. I mean, I agree with the people that would say that it was the powers that be that assassinated John Lennon, um, because John Lennon was saying a lot of things that were very very contrary to the status quo, or at least the status quo that the government and mainstream media wanted to put forward. Very anti-war, um, under any circumstances. Very anti-violence. Very anti-work, anti-establishment, which was brilliant for. It was just another aspect of the us and them sort of culture happening, and that was just intensified by by Lennon's assassination. Um, and so there was, but of course, it was just done by a lunatic. So there was no blame for any of the people that were to blame, probably to blame, possibly to blame. Mid '80s, CDs outsell vinyl for the first time. That was a very important thing because vinyl cost a lot to produce, and therefore it would cost a lot to buy. So suddenly CDs are outselling vinyls. Everyone was saying it was the end of vinyl. Music was suddenly a lot cheaper to get hold of, and so that was great for the proliferation of music and swapping ideas. Everything started to mix with everything else. I mean, it already had been, but to a higher degree. And house and techno started to happen. And that was in the middle of the sort of ecstasy binge I think it was either Dallas or DC, Washington DC, where ecstasy was still legal, and I think 500,000 pills of ecstasy would go down. I think every week in DC, before the anti-drug police rushed a bill through with lots of later found to be faked evidence saying that ecstasy reduced serotonin levels in the brain, and that was all sort of hushed up. It was just ecstasy is illegal now. There was actually no proof at all that it injured you or harmed your brain capacity at all. But it continued to happen, and it was the fuel of the rave movement, which carried on sort of through the 80s, through the 90s, and continues today. The rave movement is still massive, but Margaret Thatcher didn't really like the rave movement, and there were lots of busts, and lots of raids on raves and stuff, and lots of people were sent to jail and just for having a good time, really, which another wedge between us and them, and so it wasn't. It was a good time for me. It's all been a good time for music, basically, but less so now. I think with the advent of anyway. Get onto that in a second. Phil Collins, mid '80s. Lots of interesting stuff going on with it. In the Air Tonight. He was the first drummer. He was a composer as well, but he played the drums live and sang, which was pretty unheard of before. The only other big drummer / singer was the singer from the Eagles, who not a lot of people know that it was the drummer who sang Hotel California. Very interesting to see being performed live. The Berlin Wall comes down towards the end of the 80s. That was huge. Pink Floyd essentially wrote an album about that, and the fall of the Berlin Wall was great for all of the social interests at the time. It was just a sign of moving forward, I guess, and out of oppression or whatever, and into freedom or whatever it turned out to be. And then George Bush Senior is in power. George Bush Senior starts all the sort of wars that shouldn't be started in the Middle East, and sells lots of guns and bombs and stuff to Iraq and Afghanistan, and that at the time there wasn't much music being written. Well, not much mainstream music that was noticed, or I've noticed anyway. At the time, that was resolutely and very loudly anti-establishment at that time. It was sort of seemed to be sort of an old thing now. It was punk was gone. Protest songs had happened and been done very well. So if you were sort of seemed to be doing protest songs, it was a bit embarrassing if you weren't doing them really well. So it was so that sort of all had all waned off, which was a pity really, because there were some pretty atrocious things being done by George Bush Senior. ADAT tape, and that helped with recordings and all such. That made cheap home recordings possible, which sort of started lots of other stuff, grunge, lots of sort of lots of teenagers thrashing out in the garage and making music that way and recording it like that, and made demos a lot easier to make, and therefore good music was happening essentially. Email, first email, 1995, I think. Email became a massive tool for music, probably quite understated really, because now the music industry wouldn't be able to survive without the internet now, or it would be. It would go through some horrible stuff. Email. I mean, if not then, as certainly now, songs demos can just be emailed off in a flash, and makes the whole process a lot smoother, and a lot faster as well. The internet spawns the long tail model, which dictates that sort of there's a lot more choice, instead of the choice that the people in the record instead of the people in the record companies deciding who you're going to hear. There's far more interaction in that you get to decide who you hear now, which is a very good thing. But it does mean that there's a lot of music out there, which is why it's the long tail model. There's a lot of stuff in the tail. Michael Jackson releases Thriller in 1980s, early 1980s, and that was the most expensive music video written to date, and became a massive internationally selling album. And it broke a lot of records. That was great. That was another excellent thing for racial integration in popular music. I mean that happened now. There was lots of very successful black musicians at the time, and REM, just before the 90s started, they're very influenced by they had quite classical influences. I haven't really touched on classical stuff. REM had very classical influences, but mixed with rock and roll. So that was they were along with Queen, actually. Queen are another one that's worth mentioning with very classical influences. They used opera in Bohemian Rhapsody, operatic singing techniques, and very interesting progressive stuff happening with Queen. The Smiths didn't please anyone or didn't please any authorities with their album "The Queen Is Dead," which is a great album, and that was another